Hey, hey, how's everyone doing tonight? Whoa, looks like having a little bit of technical difficulties, but it is Conspiracy Brother here, um, doing episode 14 of Uncomfy Truths podcast, and I'm gonna get into the show. Let's see. Looks like Conservative Brother fell off. If I can, let me see. So I'll just wait for him to come back. Give everybody a chance to get in. Let me mute and I'll play some music, just a little background music while I wait for him to get back. All right. Back. We're back. We're back. So it's all good. We just had a little technical difficulty, but Conservative Brother's back. I'll let him introduce himself, and we can he can introduce the show.
All right, everybody out there, Uncomfy Truth listeners, welcome back to Uncomfy Truths, episode 14. Thank you, Conspiracy Brother, for holding the fort. You know how it is out here in internet land. Have a little, connection problems every now and then. So you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, definitely just gonna kick things off. What I'm gonna do is actually throw up our first topic. I'm not sure, Conspiracy Brother, what you started speaking on, but I'll
Oh
go.
no, I just waited. I waited so you could take
Okay.
control. You know, I'll just
All right.
wait.
All good.
Yeah.
So let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we got a lot to talk about. We're just gonna kind of slow roll through each one, starting with our good friend Xi Jinping in China, a leader of the Chinese Communist Party. He actually he visited San Francisco this week. So I think he left today or they just wrapped up today. So I'm just pulling up the article right here. Let me know, Conspiracy Brother, if you see my screen.
Got it up.
Okay, cool. So here we go from Reuters. So what China Xi's gained from his Biden meeting? Based in San Francisco, November 16th, Reuters. When Chinese President Xi Jinping met executives for dinner on Wednesday night in San Francisco, he was greeted with not one, but three standing ovations from the U.S. business community. It was one of the several public relations wins for the Chinese leader on his first trip in 6 years to the U.S., where he and Biden reached agreements covering fentanyl. Oh, we got to get to that. Fentanyl, military communications, and artificial intelligence on the sideline. Three were outcomes the United States had sought from China rather than the other way around, said two people briefed on the trip. But Xi appeared to have achieved his own aims, earning U.S. policy concessions in exchange for promises of cooperation and easing of bilateral tensions that will allow more focus on economic growth and a chance to woo foreign investors who increasingly shun China. We invite friends from the business communities across the world to invest and deepen your footprint in China, he said, promising action on the list of items that irk foreign investors, from IP theft to data security. China's economy is slowing, and early this month it reported first quarterly deficit in foreign direct investment. And the ruling Communist Party has battled political intrigues that have raised questions about Xi's decision making, including the sudden and unexplained removals of his defense minister. If the U.S. and China can manage their differences, it will mean Xi Jinping doesn't have to divert all his attention to that bilateral relations, said Alexander Neal, an adjunct fellow at Hawaii's Pacific Forum think tank. Um, Dropping sanctions for cooperation. It's going into a little bit more here. But yeah, Conspiracy Brother, go ahead and kick it off. What are your thoughts on this? I could read a little bit more of the article, but I'd love to get your initial thoughts on this development.
Yeah. So what I think, when you look at the way the whole thing went about, the whole meeting went about, and um, just the way Biden is in general, right? We don't have to speak specifically about this moment, but just how he is normally.
Right.
It's what this shows, and we kind of talked about this last episode. What this shows is just that the U.S. no longer has the control that they used to have on the global stage. You know what I'm saying? Our country, our military is stretched so thin. Our commitments are so vast that we're not able to, as a nation, enforce the kind of global control that we would like. Right? I personally, and I say we, and I use that terminology a lot, just speaking more as a person who lives in this country, as an American, more so than that it necessarily is indicative of my own political or ideological beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is the way the power structure would like to be. And 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, um, maybe even 10, we were in a position where we could control what went on in China, and we didn't have to be so cautious about what was going on in Russia, and whether or not they were capable of mounting an adequate defense. And we didn't have to also worry about the Middle East and what it was dealing with. And so, we have all of these different issues cropping up at the same time, along with a recession. And I'm sure if you took I didn't look up any statistics, but just on my personal mood, what I see, what I experience out and about, I would say that American patriotism probably has to be at an all-time low.
Mm-hmm.
And the perception of America as a country has to be at an all-time low. And so you have all of these overlapping negative effects at one time. And then, your president is Joe Biden. And so, he sums up exactly the impotence that this country has, right? Um, and so, like I said before, you look at the Roman Empire, and they always have that, they have that video where it's like chicks asking their husbands or boyfriends or whatever, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And like I said, previous episode, it's not something that I think about frequently, but when I do think about it, it's within the context of the decline of the empire. And we can see in our daily lives how it must have felt for all those Roman citizens back in the day to uh, to live through that vast change, the breaking up of the empire, and we can kind of see. Obviously, it won't be an identical process because we're still a very large country, and I mean, it's always possible that the country could split off into different. But culturally and historically, we have too much of a common history that I don't think that would be an adequate, um, a realistic, I'll say, a realistic occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you do see pockets of the country that could split off if something, I think it would be the most extreme cases. But that's just my opinion about it. Joe Biden sums up the impotence of America as as the only game in town, as the unipolar uh, power in in the world. Right.
Well said, man. Well said. Yeah, I think very similar. I just think this is kind of like a path. Unfortunately, we can't sit here and blame Biden or the current Democrats in office. I mean, this goes all the way back to I think the NAFTA deal with Bill Clinton. You know, first opening up that segue between uh, business with China and the U.S. And obviously we know about the IP theft, the data fraud. There's even Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki. He opened a gold mine in China. They took his gold mine after he struck gold. So there's so many endless examples of different companies and kind of different ways where China won't play fair. And to be honest, Trump was the only one that called that out and actually put things in place for that. Another thing that's just very, disturbing. Once again, this doesn't shouldn't surprise anybody. But there's actually even a guy, I think, filmmaker Lee Smith. He has a little bit of affiliation with the Daily Wire. I think it was like a Daily Wire produced doc. So it was, a little bit of left leaning bias. I mean, the right leaning bias in there. But he did an excellent 4-part series, like 4 or 5-part series called China, the Enemy Within. I'm thinking you can only get it on Daily Wire Plus. Might be some segments floating around on YouTube. But basically, he kind of entails and details on how really China has its tentacles in everything. So we're looking at this sort of like this is like the sort of the dog and pony shows, kind of the fancy cameras. This is kind of just we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg here. And what I think that documentary does really well laying out on how basically there's a whole episode dedicated to Anthony Fauci's ties to China, with Obama attempting to shut him down as far as the gain of function research. He goes ahead and throws that gain of function money into a different organization or third-party nonprofit, and he's able to fund his Wuhan lab. The second episode dives all into Biden, just how Biden has his tentacles all in Ukraine. There's a lot of different ties we can go into, spend a whole episode on that he has with China. And it's not about, oh, we're just trying to, better relations. At the end of the day, he's trying to enrich himself along with his counterparts. Third is on education, not just the whole TikTok deal with, that being China owned, but there's just been years and years of documented history of basically China infiltrating the education system. Everything from students that are from the Communist Party that go over to China to study, learn. There's countless articles of like Harvard, Stanford, or I don't want to name the specific universities, can't remember offhand, whether it's Columbia or whatever it was, but these students get busted like stealing IP, theft. And then a lot of times, unfortunately, there's a lot of Chinese nationals or immigrants that get sent over here, and they may not even have any knowledge that they're being used as a mole or a spy for the CCP. I mean, a lot of them are trained to do that, but a lot of them end up not having knowledge that they're being used to infiltrate, gain information through the CCP, as well as the NBA, LeBron James, and all his ties to China. We already know that. And then finally, Hollywood. In a lot of the years of China not allowing any movies to be shown in China, then I think over the past 10 years, they started to slowly be, let into their market. But hey, you know what? We need you to go back and change this. We need to see China in this light. We need to make the US the enemy. China needs to be shown in this good light. So I think Biden is just really just one facet, if you will. China's a huge, just like this, the movie, just like the TV show, The Wire, how every season was kind of based on a facet of the city, like police and education and the drug dealers. Like China, China has like its own The Wire series. You could dedicate like a facet of every institution of the U.S. on how it's linked to China. So this doesn't surprise me at all. This is kind of just all for the bells and whistles and kind of the glorification of China and the Communist Party. So yeah, that's just my deal, man. It just goes to show once again, Biden is just the perfect puppet. You said impotence. I also would say the incompetent impotence. Um, but yeah, that's just yeah, that's all I got to say on that. Anything else you like to
Well,
add, conspiracy brother?
yeah, I think it was. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah,
I think it was really the way you said, looking at NAFTA, right? Because I think
yeah.
fundamentally that is a really a cause of a lot of the issues that we're having. Because what happens is America thinks that it can transcend itself and maintain power. And what I mean by transcend itself is America was at one point in time and we don't need to get into why at this moment, but America at
Mhm.
one point in time was the industrial engine of the world, right? And very uh, export heavy economy. We made things and people bought the things we made, from cars to consumer appliances and things like that. And what happened is it's almost as if the wealthy in America thought that they could remove their manufacturing base and still maintain control over the world through financialization. That's one of the things that you saw happen in London, in England more specifically as a nation, but London is like the global head of finance, right? But at one point in time, the British Empire produced things. They exported things and imported things. They actually did things. And so there isn't a way to sustain a country or an economy. And when I say economy, I mean for everybody. I don't mean just for wealthy and moneyed elites. But there isn't a way to sustain an economy for everyday people through a financialized economic system. You can't do it. Not enough people can participate in it. And so not enough people can benefit from it. And so when you look at the way that programs like NAFTA and other free trade deals have affected the manufacturing base, the low skilled workers. And I mean, this is an issue too that you find with the border. And I mean, the exploitation of workers, because there are some jobs that you cannot export, you cannot outsource. And so what you do is you allow people to come to the country to work illegally. And what you can do, even legally, through like H-1B visas, what will happen is with those being employer sponsored visas, the employer has all the leverage. So let's say you work at a job, and when I went to San Francisco maybe 6-7 years ago, and I was talking to an Uber driver, and he grew up in San Jose, was a white guy. And he was saying, he lives in San Jose, because I was just trying to figure out, from the people, how could they afford to live here? What do you do for a living that you can stay in San Francisco? And he actually lived in San Jose, which is more expensive than San Francisco. And he said that he grew up there, so it was just home for him. And so, he drove Uber, and he did a lot of like gig work. And he was an older guy, maybe in his late 30s to mid 40s, right? So, I mean, within the context, he could have even been in his 50s. And he said, there are a lot of Indian people there now. And so I looked up, H-1B visas and that whole process. And so one of the things, like, let's say you're in the Silicon Valley or whatever, you work in a tech industry. Let's say you make $250,000 a year and you're an Indian immigrant, H-1B visa. And that's a lot of money to the average person. That's a substantial amount of money. But the thing about San Francisco is it's so expensive that is not a lot of money there, right? So you could still be in an apartment because you can't afford to buy a home, right? And so let's say you do the job 5-6 years, you're making $250,000, and you say, well, I deserve a raise. I'm a good worker. I'm never a problem. The things that I do are profitable. Your employer might say, hey, since you want a raise, we'll send you back, and then we'll get somebody else and sponsor them to come and do your job. And so that leverage, what that does, it's twofold. One, you de-incentivize the United States educating its own people in these types of industries. And two, it de-incentivizes these people who come over here to work in these industries from asking for more money or demanding better pay or better working conditions. You see what I'm saying? And so this is what has really destroyed our country for the worker, for the average citizen. You cannot survive, by and large, in America. And what is happening is China, they're trying to stress, and they are, they definitely have some authoritarian policies and procedures and cultural norms that they do. But I would argue that in a lot of ways, America does too. But when you look at the way that they are trying to, I think Xi Jinping said that they're aiming for a socialist government by 2050 or 2030 or something like that. They're aiming for a fully socialist government where they'll have multiple parties. The Communist Party will not be in control. There'll be more freedom. It'll be less restrictions. And it had something I was just listening to today, Rania Khalek, I think it's Now This, or Breakthrough News, where she was talking about Xi Jinping was talking. Let me see. I pulled the video up just so I can get the title. She was talking specifically about him, and it's called. Let's see. It is. The video is called "How China is Taking on Billionaires and Big Tech to Combat Inequality." So they're trying to really get at inequality, and we can look at that and say everyone should be able to succeed and fail on their own. But when we understand how it's applied in everyday life, on average, the hardest working people in America do not see the return on their labor. And so these are all things that make the communist ideology or the country of China appeal to young people who feel like they're in a dead-end job or a dead-end situation in their life, and they don't have a legitimate alternative. During the Cold War and in the 60s and in the 50s and in the early 70s, the United States was a place where you could work hard and make money and support a family and buy a house and have a vehicle or two and send your kids to college and, maybe have a vacation home and go on vacation 1 or 2 times a year. And what you find now is that, adjusted for inflation, the average worker has lost money, in real money, when you adjust it for inflation, from 1973 to now, right? While CEO pay has gone up 300 or 400%, right? So American capitalism no longer offers a legitimate alternative to the authoritarianism of a China or a Soviet Russia, even though Soviet Russia is not around, right? They don't offer a legitimate alternative. And so what people are saying, young people especially, who are more sympathetic to the idea of socialism, are saying is, if I'm restricted in my speech, and we've seen that the past 3 years from the vaccine situation, people having to be forced to take vaccinations, being forced to mask, being forced to stay home from work and school and things like that. If I've got to live under an authoritarian environment, at least this one promises to satisfy my material needs, right? So I have a medical system that I don't have to pay an arm and a leg for. I'd have a job. I'd have the opportunity to go to college, and it wouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg and be saddled with thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, right? So I know I went a lot longer than I expected to, and hopefully, it all makes sense with what we're talking about. But ultimately, the United States is stretching itself too thin to be able to keep the posture that it has grown accustomed to keeping in the global marketplace and in the global stage. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think you couldn't have put it any better. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the U.S., the deep state, they ultimately want to become China. They want to become that, even though we are still technically the number one superpower, there's still something appealing, the appeal of ultimate absolute authority under a communist socialist regime, that a lot of these deep staters just find so much more appealing. Obviously, they can enrich themselves. And to your point, I think when you said there were people that feel like, hey, I'm working this day and job, I can't really, move up, the state of the economy. I don't think they're like, well, I'm just going to submit to the. I feel like communism has been so glorified, especially through the education system. It's part of what the third episode of the China Enemy from Within talked about. That I think a lot of people, yeah, like you said, they can't get ahead, and they're like, I might as well submit to this. But I think a lot of people are kind of just glorified and really just want to do it. I just feel like there's just been so much, with TikTok and social media. Even though communism has been tried plenty of times, it's killed more than any natural disasters. Socialism has destroyed more countries than anything else. Just another example of it. Yeah, I had another point I was going to make about China as well, and we could be on this for a minute. But yeah, it's just very. Also, too, there's another documentary called Agenda: Grinding America Down. Came out about 12 years ago. The filmmaker was recently on Andy Frisella's podcast, and they kind of lay it all out on just really the agenda to turn the U.S. into a communist state. So we can kind of deep dive on this further, but let's go ahead. I'm sure there's a couple of points I'm forgetting about, but if they come back, we'll go back to the China topic. But let's move on to the next one. All right, here's what we got. Industry leaders form entertainment alliance to fight anti-Semitism in wake of the Israel-Hamas war and rising hate crimes against Jews. All right, so alarmed by the Israel-Hamas war and a rising tide of hate directed at Jews, prominent entertainment industry creatives and executives have formed a nonprofit devoted to combating anti-Semitism. The Entertainment Alliance to Fight Anti-Semitism has come together in the past few weeks following the October 7th Hamas terror attacks in Israel. And in the shocking rise of anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S., nearly 2,000 members of the creative community have signed a pledge that condemns discrimination and affirms Israel's right to exist. Just as we bonded together to fight for other forms of hatred and bigotry, we stand and united in our pledge to fight anti-Semitism wherever it appears. We have seen what happens when unbridled Jew hatred goes unchecked. We pledge not to let it happen on our watch. The pledge reads in part: among the members of the organizers of the EAFA are showrunners Howard Gordon and Hank Steinberg and director Kimberly Price. This group assembling is funding and looking to hire an executive leader who will be tasked with working with existing anti-hate organizations and pursuing outreach campaigns through media and entertainment channels. As devastating as it has been to witness the unabashed display of vitriolic anti-Semitism here and abroad, being part of the groundswell support of something the grassroots movement has given all of us hope and purpose. All right. Let's see here. EAFA was born out of the same alarm that spurred the ADL in September to establish the Media Entertainment Institute, goal of engaging industry insiders on the persistence of anti-Semitic and hateful tropes. EAFA came together as a collective call to action to confront the tide of anti-Semitism, blah, blah, blah. A lot of these people that signed it include Andy Garcia, Ben Stiller, Claire Danes, Greg Berlanti, Warren Littlefield. I remember he was the head of NBC in the 90s, that must-see TV era. Jason Blum, the horror, big time horror producer, and others from the CAA and WME agencies. Yep, so here's the full pledge. I pretty much sums it up. So, Conspiracy Brother, I got a lot to say about this, so I'll go ahead and let you kick it off.
Well, I the issue is really there's a conflation of what is anti-Semitism and what isn't, right? Because anti-Semitism, at least as I always understood it, was hatred or any kind of negative energy, action, or whatever directed at Jewish people, right? And I think what you've seen happening in this Israel-Hamas war is a critique of the state of Israel, right? And it would be, in my opinion, critiquing Israel is no more anti-Semitic than it would be necessarily to say racist to critique the United States, right? These black people live here. White people live here. Would it be accurate to say that if you critique the United States, you are a racist? You know what I'm saying? No, because what we're understanding, in, at least as far as I can, say, is that the country itself, the actions taken by the country are not necessarily reflective of the people who live in it. So even if somebody wanted to make critiques specifically about Benjamin Netanyahu or other Israeli politicians, that doesn't also make this an anti-Semitic thing. Now, if you resorted to making critiques that were based off of cultural heritage or identifiable markers, that might be a different story. But if you're just critiquing the decisions they make, that's, and then, historically, Hollywood has had a very strong Jewish presence. So I think it's a little interesting that this is even something that they will be claiming is happening in the industry. And I get that they're speaking about the wider action or reaction to the war between Israel and Hamas. But even looking at that distinction, it is not a war between Israel and Palestine, because there are innocent Palestinian people who are just being caught in the crosshairs of all this. But, you sit and you look at how what this seems like to me is like a type of propaganda, because you create, just like when, a couple years ago when it was the No Asian Hate Crime bill, right?
Right.
It's just easy for people who don't read a lot of news or watch a lot of news or do a lot of research to cling to whatever is being promoted the heaviest in the mainstream.
I stand with the
And
current
so,
thing syndrome.
right, I support the current thing, correct. And so what you'll see is people who just will latch on to this and say, this makes me a good person. When, like for example, Sarah Silverman, who was a Jewish lady, on her show on Comedy Central, she did blackface, right?
Right.
And is that acceptable? Is that a form of anti-black racism? Like, where do we draw the line here in our response to these types of uh outrages? You know what I'm saying? So I'll let you kind of take it from here.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. I think basically um some of this has to do with kind of, you know, the hand that you fed, or the hand you fed is now biting you in a weird way. Um, a lot of these sort of, Hollywood liberal elites, were Jewish. For years, they stood behind a lot of anti-Israel, anti-Jewish organizations, including BLM. You had Patrice Cullors, the BLM founder, I think one of the leaders, dating back as far as 2015, shouting, I don't know about the river to the sea message, but definitely like a pro-Palestine, you know, and once again, there's a lot of nuance there, but a lot of their rhetoric was about ridding the land of the Jews, and not just like, oh, we want to peacefully send you guys packing, So it's an awkward moment with a lot of these sort of Hollywood liberals, these Jewish liberals waking up to it. I think there was even this podcast called The Leftovers with Ethan Klein. I don't follow it. I heard about this through Tim Pool. Ethan Klein's like a podcaster, YouTuber, started grifting into politics. He had this podcast with Hassan Piker. And basically Hassan Piker, they were arguing about, like, and Ethan Klein was literally like, well, these are babies. Babies aren't settlers. And Hassan Piker was like, yeah, no, babies are settlers. Yeah, they deserved it, basically, is what he was saying. So I just think it's just very interesting on how, like, this is kind of like just how Trump derangement syndrome, Trump broke a lot of people's brains. COVID derangement syndrome, you have a lot of COVIDians that are always going to wear the mask and take all the boosters. Now you have a lot of people like from the far right, even, that are just like pro-Israel, never criticize anything about them, you know. But at the same time, there's a lot of nuance. You got a lot of these Jewish donors from these college institutions for years have halls named after them, donated millions to these institutions that are now pulling back. I mean, I think they have the right to send their money wherever they want. I'm not going to argue that. There's even students that signed, like, a pledge to stand with Hamas, and now they're on a Wall Street, blacklist from jobs. I think that's a bit extreme. I think, once again, kids make stupid mistakes. The companies have the right to do that. They're in their feelings. But it just, once again, is a big sort of slap in the face, wake up call that, yeah, the left, guess what? That cancel culture that you guys love benefiting from, that you champion, censorship, free speech, like, shut up, this isn't the right thing. Guess what? It came right back to you. We've been telling you, we've been warning you. And guess what? Now it's landed right on now you find yourself at the wrong end of it. All right. So that's just sort of my initial take. I think, once again, this sort of, this does sort of latch on to the whole, just I hop on the current thing. Just how when they were trying to cancel Kanye and Kyrie Irving last year, they sent a letter to Amazon like, please remove Hebrews from Negroes. This is such this is just a travesty to, what, there's criticism, there's legit criticism, and then there's hate. If you're, like you said, criticizing someone from their cultural background, their race, who they are, like indistinguishable characteristics, that's wrong. But I just find it very funny, conspiracy brother, how we were screaming from the mountaintop on things such as George Soros, a lot of his sort of far left open society activity that is driving up crime. He hires these soft on crime prosecutors that continue to raise crime and violence in the cities. It's funny how anti-Semitism applies to that, even though we were criticizing the person, not who they are. And the left just could never see that. The left was so black and white about it. But as soon as it's Israel, and all of a sudden, well, there's criticism, anti-Semitism. So now the left has all of a sudden woke up to nuance, to context, to, oh, well, you can criticize. Guess what? If I knew a little bit more about Israel, yeah, I still have criticisms of Israel. I don't stand with Israel. I don't completely stand with Palestine. But guess what? Just like how I could criticize George Soros, I can criticize Israel as well. But the left forever, you couldn't criticize the ADL. You couldn't criticize George Soros, even though they did a lot of things in their behavior where they just happened to be this race. But that's what kind of gets me, is that the left's having a big wake-up call, and now all of a sudden they have nuance. They're woken up to how you can criticize a group of people and it's not anti-Semitic. Well, yeah, thank you. We've been fucking telling you that for a while, but we couldn't criticize Soros. So that's all I got. Seriously, brother.
Yeah, and so like even what did you just say? You were talking about BLM and how a lot of these groups. What I think happens with a lot of people, man, they just like, it's like that Chris Rock joke. Remember, he was talking, I think it was Bigger and Blacker. And he said O.J. Simpson had to pay his ex-wife $30,000 a month for food. And he said, what are you eating? I'm paraphrasing. What are you eating that costs $30,000 a month? And then he made the joke, I guess she want extra cheese on her Whopper. And then he said, I'm not saying he did it, but I understand.
Right.
And I feel like, that was the punchline of the whole joke.
Right.
But I feel like that's the context that's missing from this thing with Hamas, right?
Right.
You can understand because like I said, the argument for me is fundamentally, you're never going to have peace in a situation where a group of people who are native or feel native to a land, who can trace historical ownership of that land for a period of time, will be able to coexist with a group of people they consider invaders or occupiers. It just wouldn't happen. If somebody moved into one of our houses and said, okay, you can have your bedroom and I get everything else, no matter how long time passed, you would not just get around to coexisting with them. It just wouldn't happen.
Right.
And so what I think a lot of the young people are not understanding the context of Hamas can still be bad and be fighting against an evil, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you can have, like, when you look at Dexter, the TV show, and he only kills serial killers.
Right.
On the surface, it's like, man, fantastic, because you're freeing society from these people. On the other hand, you're killing people and you have no problem with it. And in a way, because you're able to deal with it, you're more of a problem, because now I'm at the mercy of your own kindness and self-control, right? You are doing the same thing these other people are doing, but you're better at it. You're better at hiding it. And so now society is at the mercy of Dexter's, like I said, his self-control. If Dexter decides to snap, he can kill everybody in Miami Beach and wouldn't be able to do nothing about it.
Oh,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we can have two evils and they can be working against each other. We don't always have to take this, the enemy of my enemy is my friend approach to our life. That's why our political system is in shambles. That's why our financial and economic system is in shambles. Our education system is in shambles. Our foreign policy is in shambles because we have allowed the people who benefit most from this disarray to set the terms of engagement for all of us. But you can still recognize that Hamas is operating from a place of logic for themselves and still say that they're evil. They're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to. I mean, it's no different than with the election, right? People wanted to say, oh, well, you got to pick the lesser of two evils. And my contention is when you pick the lesser evil, you're picking evil. So you don't really have a position to stand on to justify yourself as some type of moral or virtuous person, right? Because you still decided evil is a legitimate option for you. Whereas I say my best argument in this process is to say, I don't have a convincing message to tell people to go vote, to vote for your mayor, to vote for your governor. Like, there are implications for local elections and state elections, but I don't have a message to give somebody apart from this guy is worse or vote for this person so this person loses to give you. And so morally, I can't sit and try to convince people to participate in that process. Write your own name in. That's kind of what I always do. And I always say I've got as good a shot as winning whatever the office is that I wrote my name in on as whoever actually wins it of doing something that I like. So, my vote is a wash either way. But that's the situation. We have too many people who just think reactionarily, and they don't want to give context, and they don't want to look into nothing. They just want to say, hey, Israel is an occupier, it's an apartheid state. They're heard them called neo-colonial or white fascist colonizer, whatever. And so Hamas must be good. And it's like, look, man, no.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? No. You can disagree with the way Israel carries out its, business, the way it orients its country, the way it orients its domestic and foreign policy, and still say, if these people wasn't in charge, it would still be a problem. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's not like the alternative is peace. If we didn't have Israel, it'd just be milk and honey. And I mean, it's funny because Jerusalem is like, where that, looking at Israel, the promised land, that's where that whole phrase even comes from when you look at the Bible. But like, this is the land of milk and honey if it wasn't for Israel's foreign policy and Benjamin Netanyahu. And it's like, no, man, that ain't it.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where I am with it all. Now, again, I agree. We should allow for people to make mistakes and say dumb things and believe dumb things. And we should all seek to educate each other and talk to each other and try to say, hey, that don't make sense. Right. We shouldn't say, hey, you supported this when you were in college. And so for the rest of your life, you're blackballed from working in this industry that you went to college for the rest of your life. Like, that's a problem. And I think, I don't know if you got the video in there from Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro kind of having their squabble about Candace saying we shouldn't be getting involved in Israel, and Ben Shapiro, who was, I guess, technically her employer, right, saying, basically trying to tell her to quit her job. Because what this is the issue with a lot of this mainstream on either side, conservative and liberal. Whenever the action is against their own interest or their beliefs, they're perfectly fine to violate the average citizen's rights. Right. So you see now all these free speech conservatives, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin. I don't know what Dave Rubin has really been on this issue. But you look,
he's pretty pro-Israel. He's pro. He's super.
I assume so. Honestly. Yeah. But like you look at those people, the same people who were just, not 6 months ago talking about how the FBI was targeting conservatives and how, the Biden administration was targeting conservative Americans and how that was a violation of our constitutional rights. You see now these same people condemning American citizens for whatever the reason, disagreeing with their opinion on a matter that involves a foreign country. It's not even, it wouldn't even be treasonous, right? Because Israel is not the United States, like Marjorie Taylor Greene used to say about Ukraine. Israel is not the 51st state. And so, even if it were, I should be able to criticize it. I talk shit about Florida. I talk shit about the South in general. I talk shit about Ohio, right? So, California. So, there should be nothing restricting me from being able to criticize Israel, even if it was the 51st state. But the fact that it is not, and there are so many people in America, so many people who support Israel, who are willing to sacrifice the freedom enumerated in our Constitution for American citizens, it would be more shocking. But I've almost reached my limit of shock from the past 4 years, from the virus and vaccine and masking and all this other stuff. So
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I think definitely, and I don't agree with Candace on a lot of things, but once again, like she is consistent. That's one thing you got to give it to Candace, and really calling out a lot of these like conservative pundits that I watch from time to time. I don't listen to Ruben as much, but definitely they really switched it up. They pulled, like we kind of talked about last episode. They pulled a 9/11 level distraction that riles people up for war. All right. And and then once again, the Democrats are far left. They've been pro-war for a while now. They claim all of a sudden now with Palestine, oh, we're anti-war, no war. But yeah, if they were firebombing Russia, you'd have no issue. If they're firebombing Israel, you have no issue. So take a seat on that. And yeah, it just goes to show like who really is for free speech. Because my attitude is, people say what they want, how as bad as it is, keep it up. Don't censor it. What they said just 6 months ago. So even if there's stuff I don't agree with on either side, I say, hey, keep that free speech up. Keep it, expose people. And even like people that have been on Tim Pool's show talking about like this guy Stephen Marshall talking about I have no problem with like pornographic books being shown to kids. We're not talking about nice little children's books where there's like a gay couple holding hands. This is full on gay behavior activity, along with like how to use a gay dating app and all this stuff for kids. Like that sort of stuff. You need those people who believe in those things that so we can screenshot it, so we could clip it up, so it exposes who these people are, and the truth, the common sense rises to the top. So I think why people on both sides of this Israel Palestine issue, they're running off of emotions. This is a type of emotion we haven't seen since, like I said, post 9/11. And the fact that once again free speech is still being attacked on all sides now means that we need to have it even more to expose these clowns. All right, so moving on, next topic. Gonna get into a little bit of lighter news in the entertainment. Box office, the Marvels. I don't have to go into this too much. The Marvels misfires with 47 million, lowest MCU opening weekend of all time. The MCU is no longer a bulletproof box office franchise. This much is clear if the Marvels misfired with 47 million in its opening weekend to land the worst debut in MCU history. Initial tracking was closer to 75 to 80 million, but those projections shrank dramatically in recent weeks to 60 to 65 million. With bad buzz and actors like Brie Larson unable to promote the film due to the SAG strike, the Marvels didn't even match those expectations. Only 2 other films in the sprawling series, The Marvels is the 33rd installment in 15 years, have opened lower than 60 million. 2008's Incredible Hulk with 55 million and 2015's Ant-Man 57, not adjusted by inflation. Although MCU has showing rare signs of wear and tear in its spandex, the franchise other 2 big screen adventures this year, Ant-Man, Quantumania, and May's Guardians of the Galaxy, did much better, still managed to hit triple digits. Third Ant-Man wasn't labeled a bust until the end of his box office run. Marvel is the latest rare MCU to flop out the gate. Just kind of gets into some more stats. Yeah, so conspiracy brother, feel free to give your take on this, and I'll
Well,
go.
I
Next.
watch a lot of like entertainment news on YouTube, a couple different channels.
Yeah.
Yellow Flash, Clownfish is probably one of my favorite. Doomcock, Walt Disney World Pro. So I watch a lot of different. I watch a lot of different.
Clownfish is really based. I watched a few of them. Yep.
Yeah, I like Clownfish a lot. I think they have good information. Doomcock is really good too. But what you see like with this, there are a lot of people trying to like Nerdrotic. I like Eric July, Rippaverse.
Yep.
He does a lot of good stuff. And those are people who are really passionate about comics. Like I don't like comics per se. I never have gotten into comics, but I like cartoons, and I kind of just like to hear what's going on in the world. And looking at like this movie, I don't know anybody. Just in general, movies aren't really the money makers they have been, and so I don't really know how anybody could be surprised that nobody's going to see this movie. And one of the things that I learned, and I talked to some people about, but like when they switched to this in the comics where they kind of made every male character a female, those books didn't sell. You know what I mean? Those books were unpopular. So to take books that were unpopular and then try to make movies out of them is not really a surprise that they're also not popular. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of what you would expect to have happen. You know what I mean? It's just that just seems like what would be normal. And so, I mean, I don't like comics at all, and I have no plans to see this movie. I have no interest in seeing this movie. I'm not particularly fond of Brie Larson, so it's nothing for me to go see this movie. Like I have legitimately, I may in a good year when movies were decent, I may see 2 movies a year. I only ever saw one of the saw Age of Ultron, I think.
Oh, throwback.
And that was it. Yeah, I've never
done.
I haven't. I never saw any of the Iron Man movies. I didn't see Thor's movies. I didn't see Captain America's movie. I didn't see any of them. I haven't even seen Black Panther yet. Honestly, I haven't seen Black Panther yet. Yeah. And so they just never, I never read comics. So it was one of those things where I felt like I would be lost. When I know people who do read comics, and I know how I could see how much they enjoyed the movies. And so for me, I didn't want to just be like some kind of poser and acting like, oh yeah, man, these are fantastic. These are great. So, but like this doesn't appeal to anybody. We just saw with the Barbie movie. Women like that kind of stuff. And we can try as a society and, with this feminist ideology, you can try to demean women for liking pink and liking Barbies or whatever. But that movie made $1 billion or whatever. Apparently, it's true. Women like Barbie and they like pink, no matter what age they are. They like that kind of stuff. They don't like superheroes. And you may find some women, who do enjoy um, superhero stuff, but it's a rarity. Women don't like Star Wars. Women don't like sports. You know what I mean? And so when you try to tailor your product, the product that you're trying to make money off of, to a group of people who have no interest in participating in it, you're bound to lose money. It's just going to happen. And so, I mean, I almost think $47 million is more than I expected it to make. Brie Larson is not likable. Captain Marvel didn't make money, right? All the money that I think Captain Marvel made was because people were waiting to see how Endgame was going to. You know what I'm saying? Like the whole way that they and I get it. You look at women. You say there's 50% of the population that we don't capitalize on. Yeah, that's true. But this ain't the way to try to get them. This ain't it. So I'm not surprised, and if anything, I'm surprised that they even made any money. That new Hunger Games movie is coming out, and I think they said it only made 5.75 million for its first day of its weekend opening. And Rachel Zegler, I know she was doing a lot of talking for the Snow White movie, so people were turned off to her. And so it's just like people don't want to hear this stuff. When you want to go to the movies, you want to be able to step away from the real world. You want to be able to step away from real life and go to a land of make-believe. And I guess that's why I don't like movies that much, because I'm not that kind of person. I don't really like to do that kind of thing. But in general, you don't want to watch a movie and be stuck in the real world. And, this is just ham-fisted writing, people who clearly don't understand how to tell a story, how to engage with an audience. It's just everything is so forced and it's so preachy, and don't nobody want to pay money to be preached at. You know what I mean? It just, that's. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my take.
Yeah. Very base, very base. I got quite a few things to say on this. And once again, like, it kind of goes back to, I'm not a big comic book guy either, to be honest with you. Like, I read comics maybe a handful of times in my life. I was a big fan of the Walking Dead show, and I think I went back during like one of the early seasons and like read a bunch of the comics online. So I kind of not really into like the whole general DC Marvel comics, but it just goes to a bigger systemic issue with not just the Marvel series, but just Hollywood in general, is the fact that they don't do it for the fans. They don't hire fans, or at least like filmmakers who are fans, who are truthful and loyal to the material, and do something that's faithful to the comic itself. So this is a bigger systemic issue, just more than outside of Marvel. And even like with even going into comics, the Green Lantern. I think there was a recent Green Lantern series where Green Lantern was gay, and then basically there was like a gay scene or whatever it was. And once again, I'm not knocking it. They could do whatever they want, but what you mentioned before, you got to go back to the market. There's I say 98, 97% of the people that read comic books. I'm not saying maybe they're all straight, but they may not, just don't want to see that. And so what you're doing is you're appealing to this 2 to 3% fringe minority that you push up as the protected class, that you're making this movie or this comic book for. And it may make you feel good politically, but at the same time, you have to go back to, are you hitting that market? Are you making money? We've seen this example with Bud Light, with Target, where there's fringe minority activists in this company that are thinking and running the marketing and the business with their political brain and not their wallet, or their political feelings and not the wallet. I'm all for diversity and casting, but let's be real. Another thing, like you mentioned, nobody likes to be preached to, especially like when you see these actors and actresses on the press, and they kind of just very kind of sitting like, you got to come see this movie. If you're not, you're anti-woman and all that, and kind of, similar rhetoric. And it's like, I'm sorry, but when you talk like that, you're slapping in the face a lot of the women that came before you. I'm sorry, but female action heroes or just females leading films in general is nothing new. We had Pam Grier back in the 70s, Foxy Brown, Coco. We had Sojourner Weaver, Aliens, one of the first female action heroes as well. So females in strong female women, there's nothing new. And there's like this very weird sort of just dismissal of a lot of the strong women that came before them. And they're just acting like, no, we're here. This is what it is. If you're not, this is the first female led. Like, what? Where have you been the past 40, 50 years? So that's the kind of ending part I can't stand, where you're kind of just shitting on all the real women that didn't use. They were just strong women and we didn't care. And guess what? Here's another thing. How do you explain this? The Marvels versus Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, 2017, right before the wake of Me Too. That movie did very well. It was a very strong story. You had Gal Gadot, who was very likable, and it was all about her finding her. Basically, I forgot the whole gist of the story, but it was all about maybe finding like a true power within herself and being anti-war. But it was a great movie. It didn't preach to you. It wasn't over the top about the feminist sort of thing. And a lot of people loved it. The fans loved it. The audiences loved it. So how do you explain Wonder Woman? I can't speak to the second one. I didn't even see the second one. I heard it was really bad. It kind of went a little far feminist with that one. But you can't explain the success of Wonder Woman and the general great reception of it and then be like, well, it's because of whip. Like, no, it's because of you guys and what you guys did. And like I said, I have no problem with diversity casting. It's just a matter of like, oh, are they doing this where, you know, they're really just a character and we can just know more about them and their story? Or are you just putting them in here to check a box? And most of the times you watch this story, they're beating you over the head with the politics because they're checking the box. You know, so this just doesn't surprise me. Like I said, it's been a systemic issue in Hollywood for a long time. Even with me, like I'm a Resident Evil fan, love the Resident Evil games, the movies, every single movie. They try to redo it several times. They find these very sort of niche filmmakers that claim they're fans of the material, who want to stay truthful. This is when you can tell Conspiracy Brother when they about to fuck it up. When the filmmaker or producer who's of the upcoming movie is gonna or TV show is gonna say, you know, we wanted to stay truthful to the material, but add a new twist to it.
Right.
Fresh direction.
What do they call it? Updated for modern audiences or whatever.
Yeah, the woke fan baiting stuff. We talked about this, but you could just tell. I'll give you another example. Even like my boy what's his name? He played Kenny Powers in Eastbound and Down. Danny McBride. Danny McBride and I think David Gordon Green, they rebooted the Halloween franchise. Bring back Jamie Lee Curtis. All right, 40 years later. They ran that into the ground. Because you had like 2-3 white guys trying to do this pro Me Too feminist take on Halloween, and it was horrible. And it's like, man, you couldn't even at least get women to write the story, at least, or you know. And they just kind of went too political with that. So, like I said, the Marvels is just a latest example of it. This has been this plight, and it just goes to show, like, I think if people, and then what they always do, they just gaslight you back. They go, "Oh, if the movie didn't do well, those just people out there don't blah blah blah." Well,
yeah,
maybe,
you're sexist, you're racist, you're homophobic, you're transphobic.
Exactly.
And it's like, I'm just not interested in this story.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like, it's a joke. I know you've probably seen the meme picture going around, but like,
which one?
With who do they make black? Well, they made so many like white characters black or historically white characters black.
Oh yeah, those are great. Yeah, Ryan Gosling as Martin Luther King.
Yeah. And it's like, you just gotta laugh. Like, you gotta laugh at it. I understand, like, historically, when you would have white actors playing black people, and you know, even having white actors, voice actors, voicing black characters. Like, I get that. I'm not oblivious to that historically. But at some point, when you want to be in this industry, you kind of have to just say, okay, look, That's the past.
Yeah.
And we don't need to try to match it with an equally reprehensible casting choice. Like me, I like Nina Simone a lot.
Yeah.
And I personally thought that what's her name? Zoe Saldana playing Nina Simone was a terrible choice.
Oh,
Right?
that
I
just
thought
happened.
it was
They're making a movie now, or did that come out?
Oh, they made it. It was like Robert Johnson, the guy who founded BET. He made it. This was like years ago. And like they actually put like dark skin makeup on her so she looked more like, and it was just like, why did you just get a lady who was darker skinned? Like,
right.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that in 2000, whatever it was, 17 or 16 or 18? And so, it's weird to me that they would do something like that. And it's equally weird, like I've said before, Little Mermaid was one of my favorite movies growing up. And so like to make the Little Mermaid black and do all this extra shit with the like one of the issues for me, and this is what I say, like modern writers, they don't know how to write a story. They don't know, they just know how to preach. So in the new movie, Ursula is played by Melissa McCarthy, who I don't like her. I don't think she's funny.
This.
And one of the things about how she tricks Ariel, so she's singing the song, Poor Unfortunate Soul. And in the original version, it says like, men up there don't like a lot of blather. They think a girl who gossips is a bore. Talking about how you won't have, because Ariel said to her, like, hey, how am I going to convince him to fall in love with me if I can't talk? And she says, men, you got your pretty face, and don't forget the power of body language. The men up there don't like a lot of blather. They think a girl who gossips is a bore. And it says something like, yet they swoon and something and fawn on a lady who's withdrawn. After all, dear, what is idle prattle for? And like they took that out of the new movie. And it's like, look, Ursula is the bad guy. So if she can't say these things, right, if we can't allow her to say this stuff, because that was what they were saying, is like it sends a negative message. And it's like, well, she's the villain. That's the point. Right. That's the fucking point. You think about Snow White, and it's like saying, oh, we can't let the witch give her a poison apple because, that'll kill her. Like, well, fucking duh. That's the point. She's the bad guy. She's supposed to be lying. She's supposed to be doing evil, nefarious shit. And this goes back to Hocus Pocus, right? When you completely remove the ability for women, female characters, to be evil in their own right, what are you saying? These witches they didn't have the capacity to do this on their own. They weren't autonomous beings. They was only being led by some evil force that was a male.
The patriarchy.
And even though we don't know what males are anymore in 2020.
Patriarchy, supremacy.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you give more power to the shit than it actually has, because you completely remove any ability for these females or anybody else, whoever this supposedly marginalized group that you're protecting is, from being able to express any autonomy. But Ursula the Sea Witch is the bad guy. Of course she's gonna lie. If our argument is we're reinforcing negative stereotypes, she's precisely the messenger to do that, because she's the bad guy. It's up to us as parents or adults to tell young children, she's bad. Don't believe this shit. It ain't true. It's not up to us to completely censor this kind of language, because in the real world, there are people like this who take advantage of people, who take advantage of young women who are impressionable and don't have life experience or guidance or protection, and they make them do shit. You know what I'm saying? It's just silly. It's silly that we as a society have gotten to the point where even bad guys can be evil.
Yep, there's a lot of glorification of the villain. We saw that a lot with Joker. Once again, these were great movies. Joker, Joaquin Phoenix. I think even recently, the new Saw, I saw Saw 10, really good. But then at the end of the day, you do see kind of like they are really making the villain, who we just loved as a villain, the early Saw movies, the early other movies, the other franchises, as you just loved them being the villain. He or she ran their own autonomy. They were just bad. And we're seeing like a very sort of coddling, over sympathization, if you will, of these villains, then women especially. Yeah, it's a great point there.
Well, see, and since you bring that up, it's funny because it was just news, and I don't know if you posted this. I think you did, but I can't remember if that's one of the articles you posted. But they're saying that young people are sympathetic to a recently published letter from Osama bin Laden. And that, to me,
yeah,
just like when we talked about the Israel-Hamas situation,
yeah,
that's got to be the dumbest fucking thing that you could do. And, for the record, the conspiracy brother thinks, shit ain't what it says about what happened with 9/11. Right. That's my belief. To put it mildly, I'll say I don't think what we were told is exactly what happened. However, Osama bin Laden is still not a good person. You know what I'm saying? He's not a good person.
Mm-hmm.
If we lived in a world that was governed by Osama bin Laden, things wouldn't be better. You could recognize that the U.S. government may be the cause of global strife for the last 70 years and still say, you know what? Osama bin Laden is not the good guy here.
Yeah.
But with this elementary ass education we have is backfiring. Because that's what it boils down to. We have this education system that really only prepared American citizens to be workers, right? And so now it's backfiring because you're not even smart enough to protect the country from legitimate external threats. You can't discern, who is a good alternative and not. You're just like, hey, it ain't the U.S. government. They must be all right. And it's like, no, man, that ain't it. That ain't it. That ain't it. Mm-hmm. That's not true.
Yeah, good point, man. We can get into definitely the Osama letter to America. I'll touch on that real quick, and we're gonna hop into the GOP debate topic. But yeah, like once again, this goes back to TikTok. TikTok's coming out and claiming like, oh, we have no, control over this algorithm. We're doing their things right now to kind of limit it. And I think they are behind some of it, a lot of it. Where once again you're getting more people to hate the West, hate America. Once again, it's good to have a healthy skepticism of the U.S. government, or really hate the government, but to also just sort of hate America in general and just the level of unpatriotic loathing for it isn't healthy long term. Once again, we can get into, there's a lot of atrocities that the U.S. government has inflicted on Black America, but it gets very sinister when you have outside foreign influences that are strategically making America hate itself from the inside out. That's different from like, hey, we got our beef, reparations, slavery with the U.S. government. We need to get ours. But that more systemic, insidious hate of America that, once again, TikTok's using to drive it through this Osama letter is just, once again, people hopping on the bandwagon, not knowing the nuance, and they're just going right on the anti-America train. So that's a whole nother different one. We'll hit on that more next week. But yeah, here we go. GOP candidates hit Trump and back Israel. Here are highlights from Republican debate. I'll touch on this briefly as they face an increasingly urgent task. Oh, by the way, conspiracy brother, I just want to give, we got to make sure to always promote, once again, those are guys that are tuning in, all 2 or 3 of you, there's Uncomfy Truths. podcast, live streaming. We're going to be getting super chats going pretty soon. And on future episodes, I'm going to talk with Conspiracy Brother. We're going to start getting like little crawls going down the bottom of the screen. We're going to have maybe a little Cash App, PayPal, or whatever, you want to send us, or you can do a YouTube super chat. So eventually, while we're live streaming this on YouTube, our goal is to live stream on Rumble and YouTube in the future. And then we're going to have little ways you can kind of help support us, in the on the screen. But once again, as they face an increasingly urgent task to emerge as a clear alternative to former President Trump, 5 Republican candidates gathered Wednesday for the party's latest debate. Trump, the overwhelming frontrunner in the race, skipped the event as usual, as he has the first 2, citing his polling advantage. There was no shortage of noteworthy confrontations on stage as the participants debated Israel-Hamas war, the future of abortion rights, and Trump himself. But with the January 15th Iowa caucus approaching, it seemed unlikely that the debate fundamentally changed the presidential nomination fight. Here are some debate takeaways. Wednesday marked the first time the presidential candidates gathered on a debate stage since the war broke out between Israel and Hamas, resulting in a far sharper foreign policy conversation compared to previous forums. The contenders were unified in offering robust support for Israel and bemoaned anti-Semitism, especially on liberal college campuses, but they said virtually nothing about protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza. GOP's familiar foreign split, however, resurfaced when the exchanges veered into the war in Ukraine, possibility of China confronting Taiwan, and how to handle Venezuela's oil market. Former United States Ambassador Nikki Haley, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, all sounded traditional GOP notes backing military aid to Ukraine, calling for vastly increased investment in the military, and linking all the global conflicts. Biotech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy tried to set himself apart, claiming the rest of the stage was part of a bipartisan foreign policy establishment that blundered into repeated disasters and foreign wars. He's talking my language. A longtime critic to aid to Ukraine, he followed up in his condemnation of anti-Semitism by calling the country's Jewish president Nazi. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis seemed like he was straddling the divide. At one point, he dodged a question about Ukraine and China by talking about boosting security on the southern border and suggesting he deport immigrants from the Middle East. The candidates all talked tough, but party divide over Ukraine ran subtlety through the night. It's not clear that they'd each act the same should they make it to the Oval Office. Then they talk about Trump. But I don't know if you had a chance to, I don't know if I want to read all this, but Conspiracy Brother, did you have any thoughts on this debate? Did you catch any clips or have any sort of takeaways?
I haven't watched any, and this is normally something that I try to do, and I have not watched any debates so far this cycle, because I think that legitimately the only person that has a shot to win as a Republican is Donald Trump.
Yep.
And so I think I'm still skeptical of Vivek Ramaswamy because people change. But I personally think that he is an opportunist, and his best opportunity to get any type of social capital on a wider stage is to run as a Republican, because if he ran as a Democrat, he still wouldn't be able to make it to the stage because Biden is being protected. So they're not nobody's going to be able to run. But like, I think Nikki Haley, at best, what you can see is she's just a nutcase. And anybody, like, I watched a video. I think it was a YouTube short of her. And somebody said something in the comments like, who is actually voting? Like, I think that was the title of the short. Like, who supports this woman? And there were people in the comments who appeared to either be like trolls or they were paid like Democrat supporters, just the way they talked. It seemed like there may have been Democrats who were, being paid to say nice things about her in order to try to convince conservatives to to potentially, swap alliances or whatever. But man, she's really crazy. And what I think is what it shows is how much the establishment is still willing to try to push a person who they think represents their interests best, right? Because she's going nowhere. You know what I mean? She's going nowhere. Um, I don't think she has enough support to actually get anything done as far as as a national office holder. Um, a lot of these people, Trump made her the ambassador to the United Nations. So I think a lot of these people, uh, they try to capitalize off of Trump's popularity, and the second they could do something, they just immediately flipped on him. That's legitimately what I think she did. I think DeSantis, he listened to the wrong people, and he thought that he could become president one day. He thought he had a shot, and I don't think he has a legitimate shot. And I think Vivek Ramaswamy, it's like people say, "Oh, you playing with house money or whatever." He has nothing to lose. He has absolutely nothing to lose, and so he can talk how he wants to talk, and he can, um, get into, because I was able to see some clips of some things he said to, I think her name is Kristen, I forget her name, Kristen Welker, I think, at
Yeah, the
MSNBC,
chick.
when
Yeah,
he
he
was
called.
saying,
Yeah. The clip he called out Christie, whoever it was, at the MSNBC. They had, like, of course, all left-leaning liberals, liberal, uh, liberal news commentators moderating. So he called that out. He called her. He called her out on basically pushing the Trump Russiagate narrative at her channel for years.
right.
Great clip.
And so, yeah, and I think, but again, I think he can do that. He can talk like that because he knows he ain't going to win either.
Right.
So he can be as forthcoming, and he can be apparently, a real pit bull about policy stuff and the way they behave. But if you're never going to be president, it doesn't really matter. And so, I think he can sell a lot of books. Eventually, he'll write a book. He can sell a lot of
Yep.
books. And I think that's ultimately his goal.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, man. I think once again these debates, I feel like it's just as useful as bringing sand to the beach. Obviously, Trump got a lot of criticism of skipping these debates, but more and more think about it, he kind of made the right call. I think also, if we had to say who kind of won the debate for the night, the whole, joke is, oh, Trump won the debate even though he wasn't there. But I kind of got to give it to Vivek, like you said. Um, I want to say he has nothing to lose, but because obviously he's self-made, he's putting his own money into it. So I think once again they're gonna come after him, smear him, whatever it is. But I think that it's one of those things where if he didn't care, he could have just not even tried to, even be in the running. I mean, kind of like Trump. Trump had this great lifestyle. He was a celebrated celebrity, multiple business owner, where he was giving up something going into this, where he didn't have to. He didn't have to. Versus you get a lot of these sort of more neoliberal candidates who grew up in the career politician lane all the way through college, all the way through their early career, where they were just establishments. So while I don't think Vivek's going to win either, I do think like a lot of candidates, you get a lot of clout and a lot of things you can get from it. I can at least respect Vivek for being able to use this platform to say the questions, to say the things that people don't want to hear, to ask those hard questions, like calling out the moderators, calling out Ronna McDaniel, basically calling her out for, like, ever since she took over, Republicans lost the 2017, the 2018, the 2020, the 2022, even the recent 2023. elections in a few key states. I do lose respect him for calling that out. As far as like Tim Scott, he's very just sort of milk toast, says the right things to feel like a very sort of moderate Republican. Obviously, he dropped out recently. Chris Christie, let's pray whenever he decides to drop out for the fourth time. Mike Pence, of course, dropped out. So yeah, I mean, this debates overall, there is just kind of like window dressing, because we all know kind of Trump's still in the running. They're either going to push Biden out or they're going to try and get a Michelle Obama, maybe Gavin Newsom ticket. That'll probably be the only thing that would really save the Democrats. The only thing I'm surprised is that they're taking this long to push Biden out. I kind of predicted they'd push him out by the fall, or at least by the 1 year election mark. But they're still kind of, it's like, remember like earlier in the year, they were kind of, media was all against Biden, a lot of hit piece coming out, these classified documents. And now it's kind of like they're going back to protecting him a bit again. So I'm just a little confused on, they need to dump Biden eventually, because now there's even more of the far left that's against Biden because he's siding with Israel. So yeah, I think these debates overall pretty useless. They're still entertaining to watch clips, and I kind of like how Vivek, even though he's not going to win, he calls out a lot of the establishment, which needs to be called out. So that's all I got. Moving on, Jewish man dies of injuries after an altercation with pro-Palestinian protesters. 69-year-old Jewish man has died as a result of his injuries that occurred at a pro-Israel rally near Los Angeles over the weekend. Authorities have not ruled it out as a hate crime. Southern California authorities are investigating the death of a Jewish man involved in the altercation. NPR religion correspondent, Jason DeRose, reports that they've not ruled out a possible hate crime. So, 69-year-old Paul Kessler attended a pro-Israel rally in Ventura County, just north of Los Angeles, on Sunday afternoon. The protest took place at the same intersection as the Palestinian rally, as a pro-Palestinian rally. See here, pro-Palestinian rally. An altercation broke out between Kessler and another person authorities are declining to name. But whom they say was there supporting Palestinians, Kessler fell on his head. The following day, he died from Ventura County, determined to be blunt head force trauma. So I think overall, once again, I guess the slant from the media is a little bit biased. Obviously, I think honestly, once again, there maybe was a pro-Palestinian protester that got mad, pushed him, he fell over. But at the same time, I can kind of feel the really pro-Israel slant on this. Like, see, they're all bad. Like, pro-Palestinian protesters, a lot of them are kind of brain dead, but they still have the right to protest. And of course, you have to call out, and obviously arrest this person for what he did. But I think the funny thing is, I don't know how it's just very weird. Like, are these pro-Palestinian protesters, are they going to get the same treatment as J6 protesters? Probably not. But once again, the media isn't exactly in their favor. So I think this is it's unfortunate, but I'm not here to just be like, oh my God, all the pro-Palestinian protesters. Oh. Now there are a lot more extreme in their rallies that we're seeing. But at the same time, I just think this is a little bit of gaslighting to get the right and the pro-Israel people really riled up. And they want to get them as riled up as the pro-Palestinian protesters are. So that's kind of my opinion, and I'm not going to read into it more than that. But Conspiracy Brother, I would like your thoughts on this.
Yeah. I've never really been a big fan of protesting, and I know that's not the point of what you're. I've never really been a big fan of protesting at all because I kind of always felt like it really is more of an issue than it is any kind of benefit to any kind of cause at all. Honestly, I feel like back when we lived in a time where like you were essentially being punished just for existing. But like protesting worked because it allowed you to display the evil of your antagonist. But I feel like in today's time, it's kind of just like it just, I mean, you end up in situations like this, don't know really what you have it almost like a gang fight. You have two conflicting protesting sides, and, then you got to deal with that. And it's just like, is it worth it? You know what I'm saying? Um, I don't know, man. I think a lot of this stuff is intended to be a distraction, a social distraction. It allows the people in power to continue to do whatever they do behind the scenes. They've met a lot of friction, and they're still getting some friction here funding Israel, because there are so many factions of the United States military industrial complex and its lackeys who want to have a funding bill for Ukraine and Israel and all that, and the border at the same time. And, the House is saying, no, we'll just do one thing at a time. And so the House passed a bipartisan funding package for Israel, and the Senate rejected it, or Joe Biden rejected it, or whatever. And so, like, to me, I don't know. I would like to. I mean, I'm sympathetic to people dying or being killed, or however you want to look at it. But I just feel like it's one of those situations where, this type of action doesn't benefit anybody. It's not, if you are on the pro-Israel side, it's not going to benefit Israel. If you're on the pro-Palestine side, it's not going to benefit Palestinians. And so it's just one of those situations where I think it was unnecessary. I mean, innocent. It's unnecessary, and it's an innocent life being taken from the world, from people who love them, from people who cared about them. But I think it's the kind of distraction, like in the Roman times. Here we are talking about ancient Rome again, but they call it the bread and circuses. And I think, this is another example of that. It's the bread and circuses. It allows them to pacify us with our own anger and rage, right? They use that against us. So.
Oh. Hey, sorry. Got a little distracted there. Yeah, man. Great point you brought up. Once again, if you're not into rallying, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. And I think, I think these are just kind of ways once again, they're riling up the base. They're pissing off pro-Israel people, demonizing the other side. And it's once again goes back to just further dividing. You're either team Palestine, you're team Israel. And it is unfortunate what happened to this man. And once again, that pro-Palestinian protester needs to be jailed, brought to justice, and not, just sort of harbored and protected by the media or, the system. But yeah, we just got to just hopefully a lot of people aren't getting psyoped and they're just fueling this division more and more and more, in my opinion. All right, second to the last topic, going to be hopefully wrapping up the next 15-20. This comes from the Daily Wire. Nashville shooter decried crackers and white privilege, leaked manifesto pages reveal. So those guys remember the tragedy earlier this year with the Nashville shooter that killed 6 people, I think 3 students, 3 staff at a elementary school in Nashville. The shooter revealed to be, I forgot her name or his name, but it was a girl who identified as a guy. Had pronouns and all that stuff. But here we go. The transgender identifying killer who murdered 6 people at a Christian school in Nashville was consumed by leftist racial hatred targeting whites as privilege, according to these horrible, got this giant toenail photo. I had to get rid of that. According to the 3 pages of the shooter's diary released by podcaster Steven Crowder on Monday, killing those kids, those crackers going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks with their daddy's Mustangs, convertibles. 28-year-old female shooter wrote in a diary entry dated February 3rd. I wish to shoot you weak ass dicks with your mop yellow hair, want to kill all you little crackers, bunch of little, F words for your goat or your white privileges, three more profanity. 3 photographs of the shooter's diary were obtained by Crowder, who reported that his investigative team independently confirmed the authenticity of the images. The Daily Wire sources have also confirmed the authenticity of the pages. The diary entries also reveal the schedule for Death Day beginning on 7 a.m. Ending at 12:37, time to die. I hope I have a high death count, ready to die, she wrote in the diary. The musings reflect the envy for stable, productive society that is targeted as dominant privileges by the critical race theory espoused in many public schools. A shooter who Daily Wire is not naming boasted to a friend before the shooting that she had left plenty of evidence behind, making her motives clear. Nashville's police acknowledged this fact after the shooting. After the shooting, police chief promised Republican Governor Bill Lee the manifesto will soon be released. And of course, it never was. The Covenant shooting was a tragedy beyond comprehension. They've been in touch with Nashville police, blah, blah, blah. But Drake broke that promise. For the better part of the year, Nashville's police department refused to release the manifesto, citing a series of contradictory excuses. Spokeswoman for Lee ignored Daily Wire's inquiries about Lee's response to the broken promise over the course of a year. Metropolitan Police Department and Tennessee Bureau of Investigation denied open records requests from the Daily Wire, the Tennessee Star, and other outlets, citing that it was ongoing investigation. Even the shooter was dead. The Star and others sued, and the police department then claimed it could not release the manifesto because it was a subject of litigation. A catch-22, given that the litigation was about its refusal to release the manifesto. A judge later allowed the parents of the Covenant attendees to intervene in the open records lawsuit to claim that releasing the manifesto would traumatize their children, even though attorney Rob, who represents 2 plaintiffs, said the parents are not crime victims under the law and that their concerns are only speculative since they don't know what's contained in the records. Tennessee law enforcement authorities also claimed they were asked by the FBI to not release the manifesto, even though in another catch-22, the FBI said it was not terrorism. Therefore, the FBI had no jurisdiction. The writings may raise questions about why the killing of the children, apparently based on their race, was not considered a hate crime by the FBI. The shooter and the children she targeted based on their race were white. The ramblings also included children, F-word, evoke stereotypes of traditional masculine children. A Nashville City Council member, Courtney Johnson, told the New York Post that she was led to believe that the manifesto was a blueprint of total destruction that was astronomically dangerous if released. The detailed agenda obtained by Crowder does not include any detail that would be useful to copycats. It merely says to take guns, go to the school, and begin shooting. Russ Pulley, Nashville City Council member, former FBI agent, was dismissive and when asked the Daily Wire on the status of the manifesto. Earlier this year, says he trusts the police. A spokesperson from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation told the AP that under state law, legislators could access the records if the committee passes a resolution, but they have not done so. Spokeswoman for Lee told AP the governor can also review the records under state law, but has declined from doing so until police provide clarity on them for the public. All right, I know the Daily Wire, it has their right-leaning bias, but Conspiracy Brother, I'd like to get your take, and then I'll speak after that. A lot going on.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, didn't this person go to this school?
Yep.
Like, didn't they also go to the school? So it's like, I get that doesn't make again, we talk about like mutually exclusive ideas. I get that, a person could go to this school and still have resentful feelings about the education and stuff, and even the people there, right? But it's so weird. Some of the terminology they used, like she's calling people F words and stuff and talking about how rich their parents were. And it's like, well, what kind of home life did you have? Were you at the school on scholarship? And like, I don't know if you've listened much to Gil Scott Heron, who is like the poet. But like, he got a song called Comment Number One. The comment number one. And it's like a spoken word poem. And he's talking about, well, he's just talking to like he's talking to he's talking to I mean the audience, and he's talking about like social unrest and like the social climate in that time. I think it was, the album came out in 68 or 69 or 67. And so one of the things he says is like, let me see if I can find it. He says, he's talking about SDS, which is the hippies, Students for a Democratic Society. And he says, let's see if I can find it. He says, let me see. So it says, he says, the present mocks us, good black people with keen memories, set fire to the bastards who ask us in a whisper to melt and integrate. Young, very young, teeny bopping, revolt on weekend young, dig by proxy. What a mental ass kicking they receive. Through institutionalized everything and vomit up slogans to stay out of Vietnam. They seek to hide their relationship with the world's prostitute, and he calls America the world's prostitute, alienating themselves from everything except dirt and money with long hair, grime, and dope. To camel hide the things that cannot be hidden. They become runaway children to walk the streets downtown with everyday black people, sitting on the curb crying, because we know that they will go back home with a clear conscience and a college degree. Right. It's a very good spoken word, just to kind of hear somebody who has such a way with words and a forcefulness with the way they speak. But he says, this is the next verse. The irony of it all, of course, is when a pale-faced SDS motherfucker dares look hurt when I tell him to go find his own revolution. He wonders why I tell him that America's revolution will not be the melting pot, but the toilet bowl. And that the verse is better. It continues, but that's my point is you have this individual, right, who apparently has some type of mental problem, right? And they say all this stuff, and what it shows is some inability to reconcile who you are at your most base level, be it a female or a white person or a wealthy white person, well off, whatever, your parents are well off, and your opinions about what that means. Right. And so you write all this stuff about people who, at least I would assume, all this stuff applies to you too. Driving your father's Mustang and going to this fancy school, and and then all the like the anti-LGBTQ language, the way she used it, so weirdly, when you're a member of that community and you use it in such an antagonistic way. What that just shows is like you have these people, like you said, sitting on the curb crying because we know you will go home with a clear conscience and a college degree. At the end of the day, you had to take it to this level because otherwise you just get older and then you'd be fine. You see what I'm saying? You couldn't ever reconcile who you were and your belief system. And so you had to resort to this horrific act, these mental problems that you had. Because, like, when I heard about it, I'm like, man, this is nutty stuff. Like, if this individual was a black person, it would still be nutty stuff, but at least it wouldn't apply to them as well. You know what I'm saying? But you're talking about people that you went to school with, or at least people who went to the same school you went to. It's such a strange situation. And I think the reason they don't want to release this stuff, they don't want to release this in any kind of major way, is because they understand how this looks. Because for the past, 6, 7 years, you've tried to tell people that members of the LGBT community, specifically the T community, just wanted acceptance, and they just wanted to be left alone, and they just wanted to be treated like everybody else. And what you see happening disproportionately is these individuals seeming to lash out at society because they feel some type of wrong, and that flies in the face of what we've been told. And so the media, as it tends to do, rather than come to terms with what is reality, they make shit up.
What it actually created, what the media had a hand in creating. And I'm gonna get to that, but yeah, keep going. Hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, oh yeah. I thought you were still going.
Oh no, that was it.
Yeah. I got a lot to say. Because once again, Daily Wire, they lean, right, obviously, unapologetically. But I think with this Nashville shooting, I'm just remember details of this. One of the staff that was killed was black. Was a black guy. And I think this just goes to show really the media and the left, the left, the media, basically their role in covering up a crime where they have blood on their hands. They stoked this extreme CRT, extreme anti-white, the LGBTQ. Once again, like, it's just a thing where, like you said, we're like, hey, we just want to be treated and get married like everybody else. And once again, I can be pro-black without being anti-white. You know, I think an Israeli citizen is just as precious as a Palestinian baby, an Israeli citizen. Same here. A white child is just as precious as a black child. A Christian child is just as precious as an atheist child. So at the end of the day, this shooter. She was a female, identified as a male, trans or whatever it was. She killed 6 innocent people, and because she wasn't white and this group of people weren't black, is why the media couldn't go into their upstorm to fuel their narrative. So what you have is you had the entire community coming out in what, like we talked about earlier, over sympathizing of the villain, of the evil person in movies and entertainment. And guess what? They come out and said this is an attack on the trans community. When it's like it was a trans shooter that did this, you know? And the gaslighting, the like no taking no responsibility, saying like, hey, this person, what they did isn't reflective on the entire community. We need to have some hard conversations on mental health, and them coming after this group of Christians. Instead, the media just blanks it all out, and they act like you could have read articles coming out from the weeks after this and would have thought that like 6 trans people got killed by like a far right Christian shooter. The mental gymnastics they did to cover it up. So I'm calling all that out. And I just think once again, just the level of just sort of manipulation, and it's just unfortunate. Uh like they did a real number just on her brain, just a level of uh sickness that came out of this. And killing this group, whether it was 6 Christian people, whether it was 6 white kids, whether 6 black kids, whether 6 Israeli or Palestinian kids. So that's kind of what I'm on right now, is the fact that the left and the media, they continue to keep the trans community as this protected class. Once again, everybody can live the life they want to live. Just stay away from the kids. live your life, get all the rights you want, live and let live. But the fact that they can't address the mental health, the mental issues with a small portion of this group and call it out, this is what leads to this. And the covering up, oh, that's not happening. The covering up the manifesto. So that is just very clear what's happening here. You don't need to read a Daily Wire article to figure that out. But, you know, at the end of the day, this person took 6 lives, regardless if they're black, white, atheist, Christian, Palestinian, Israeli. It shouldn't matter. It's the action, not like, okay, here's the action. All right, what's the identity of the person? Okay, based on identity of the person, we need to spin it this way. Like, no, motherfucker. This is the truth. This is what happened, and that's it. But of course, we don't live in that perfect world. We live in the world of narratives, and how can we spin this or cover this up to keep propping up our narrative and keep harboring our protected class at the expense of our citizens and safety. So I'm gonna just land my plane there. Anything else to add, conspiracy brother?
Well, yeah, and see the reason why this is such an issue is because, you know, you want to say these people don't have mental health problems, right? To be polite, you want to say that they want to portray this as if it's just normal, reasonable behavior, and so there's not a way to do both. You can't say these people are normal and then simultaneously put any restrictions on what they do. And so you have these people who are suffering from clear mental and emotional problems.
Yep.
And then, you know, they do this kind of stuff. And it's like, what could we have done? What could be a better alternative? What could have happened that could have, you know, alleviated this situation, right? But when you enable a behavior, you know, like it's like one of my favorite kids stories, The Emperor's New Clothes.
Yep.
And so this whole time the Emperor's walking around butt naked, but everybody's just telling him, "Hey man, you look great. You look great." And he's believing it, and they're deluding themselves into believing it because everybody wants to be wise.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, "Hey, I'm wise and this is the criteria and I accept that," and then say, "But also you're naked." You know what I'm saying? That you can't. Those are mutually exclusive ideas because they're fundamentally opposite. You know, diametrically opposing points of view. That I accept, you know, that these people do not have a mental health problem, and simultaneously that they you know should have some type of restriction on their life because of a mental health problem. You can't have it both ways.
Amen. All right, settles that. All right, last article as we kick off. Once again, guys, those are still listening, Uncomfy Truths podcast. Feel free to follow us on Rumble and YouTube. I'm Conservative
Odyssey
Brother.
as well.
Yeah, Odyssey as well. We're on Odyssey. Our goal is to be live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, maybe simultaneously, at least on 2 out of the 3. And then we're going to have, if you feel like you want to hear more conversations like these, contributions are appreciated. You can hit us up on the super chats, and then pretty soon we'll be having like a Cash App, PayPal, something like that. And then we're going to have it in the lower third. So you'll see like a little news crawl at the bottom of the screen. We'll get that going for future episodes. All right. So last article, Candace Owens blasts emotional amid online feud. Far-right commentator said her colleague has thrown her under the bus, also accusing him of being unprofessional. Candace Owens said that her colleague and fellow right-wing commentator Ben Shapiro should be embarrassed amid an online feud between the pair. Accused him of making I can't even say that word, of her, on her. Miss Owens, who is known for her outspoken views on issues including COVID vaccine, the Black Lives Matter movement, said Mr. Shapiro had thrown her under the bus, also accusing him of being unprofessional and emotionally unhinged. It comes after a video shared online showed Mr. Shapiro speaking at what appeared to be a private event, during which he described Miss Owens as false sophistication, certain issues disgraceful and ridiculous. The pair both worked together at the Right News wing company, The Daily Wire. While Mr. Shapiro did not reference a specific specific thing Ms. Owens had said or done in the video. His remarks came following several posts he made on X. No government has any right anywhere uh, has a right to commit genocide ever. There are no justification for genocide. I can't believe this needs to be said, even considered at least a bit controversial. She said on November 3rd. Candace Owens recently sat down with Tucker, as we can see here, Tucker on X. Her comments were taken to be referencing the ongoing conflict between Hamas and Israel in the Middle East, though Ms. Owens did not specifically mention speaking to Tucker Carlson for his series Tucker on X. Ms. Owens said she still did not have any clarity on Mr. Shapiro's criticism of her, that his remarks were just ad hominem attacks. I just can't respond to it on a level of intellect because there's nothing that he has expressed in that, at least in that short clip, that he fundamentally disagrees with in terms of what I said. I will say that I'm not going to respond with said ad hominem attack. How do you say that, conspiracy brother? Ad hominem?
Yeah, ad hominem. Yep.
Oh, I'm my literate ass. All right. I don't think it helps further discussion. And if it was me that was caught on video saying that about my colleagues, I would be embarrassed too. So once again, we got more of the back and forth. I get we get the general gist of it. Ben Shapiro is extremely pro-Israel. Once again, he's one of the biggest conservative pundits. He also has, I think he had just came back from Israel a few weeks prior to the attacks. I think he has family and friends there. So emotions are really running high. I feel like Candace Owens has more of the level head here. Ben Shapiro, someone that says facts over feelings. I feel like Ben's been a lot more in his feelings. He has the right to do that. And disturbing to me, conspiracy brother, I'll let you take it, but I feel like a lot of the right conservatives, are like, oh, you shouldn't tell black people what to think, or blah blah blah, like the left does. The left liberals do that. We're now starting to see that on the right. So Ben Shapiro's kind of got a little bit of liberal tendencies, trying to talk down to Candace about her views and how she should think a certain way. I'm seeing a lot of that eerie sort of attitude that you usually get from the far left. So, conspiracy brother, I'd like to get your take on this.
Well, it's interesting. She quoted a Bible verse, right?
Right. Remember that.
And she quoted a Bible verse, and then Ben Shapiro says something to her. I'm trying to remember what verse it is. Cannot. But then Ben Shapiro said something to her in response to the verse about, let me see. Let me find it because I wanna give it the full.
Yeah, she definitely kind of, like I said, had the more level head. I don't agree with Candace on a number of issues. There's things I do agree with her on, but she's kind of like she sees past the 9/11 emotional rile up, go out and kill all of them. Even though Israel had a hand in these, as much as I still condemn Hamas, once again, you can't call it a level an entire group of people. Send in teams, SEAL teams to go hunt them down within the Gaza. Um, but
Oh,
yeah.
so the
So
verse
what?
was
Yeah.
the verse was the one about not being able to serve two masters, and
Right.
what she said was, I want to read it directly because I cannot remember. I can't remember this verse. And she doesn't list it, but here it is. Blessed are the peacemakers. So it's the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Well, not the Beatitudes. It's a Sermon on the Mount, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So that last part is what she
Mm-hmm.
wrote. And in response to that, Ben Shapiro said, if taking money from the Daily Wire somehow comes between you and God, by all means quit. Minutes later, Owens accused Shapiro of acting unprofessional and emotionally unhinged for weeks and called him utterly out of line for suggesting that I cannot quote biblical scripture. And I don't know if we've talked about this much, but that's one of it's kind of a newer idea. They call it Judeo-Christian values. And it's really like a misnomer because the concept of Judeo-Christianity doesn't exist. It exists no more than you would say Judeo-Islam or Islamo-Christian, right? And the reason it doesn't is because fundamentally what Christians believe and what Jews believe are different, right? Christians believe that Christ is the Messiah and Jews do not.
Right.
And that's the fundamental tenet of Christianity. It's not even like a subsection or, you know what I'm saying, a subplot. It is the fundamental tenet of Christianity that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. And Jews don't believe that. And so I've done a bit of research, not like super intense research, but from what I've heard, a lot of Jews, Orthodox Jews and even non-Orthodox Jews who just, I don't know if Ben Shapiro will be considered Orthodox or not because he doesn't have a beard, but within the Jewish community, observant Jews have an antagonistic relationship with Jesus. And it isn't simply, a difference of opinion, right? They have an active antagonistic view of him. And so I think I heard somewhere like Jews really don't Testament at all. Like they don't consider it anything. It is of no value to them. So I'm not surprised that it would be possible that he doesn't know let's see, these scriptures. So let's see. Yeah, it's Matthew 5:9. Matthew is the New Testament. And so, yeah, that is the Beatitudes. Yeah, so that is the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children. Yeah, so that's the Beatitudes. I was right. That still may have been the Sermon on the Mount. But he would know that because he's a Jew and Jews don't read the New Testament. And so she also said something like, about how he couldn't accept her quoting scripture. And so when you have people who make a religious argument for Israel and submit to this Judeo-Christian, Christians I'm speaking about specifically, and they submit to this Judeo-Christian idea, the problem is that you're not really aware of what the other side believes. And so if that's your foundation for why you think you should be involved, it's a problem. But in this situation here, you see a person who, like we talked about earlier, when you have someone who disagrees with your belief system or conflicts with your belief system, the pro-free speech, because if they were talking about trans people in sports, if they were talking about what is a woman, they were talking about, any of that kind of stuff, they would be arguing, hey, you should let us on campuses to have these conversations because that's free speech. But when somebody says, hey, we don't need to be sending more money to Israel, we don't need to be getting involved in these conflicts, America needs to focus on America. Now you want to have them canceled and you want to tell her to quit. And because you're the co-founder of the Daily Wire, you're not just an employee, but you're the co-founder of the Daily Wire, if I'm not mistaken. Telling somebody they should quit it has a different weight. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. If I own a company and I tell someone to quit, it's different than if I'm just an employee and I tell you to quit.
And Benny don't walk it off. He's just all in his feelings, man. Just feminine feelings. Sorry, keep going.
Oh no, I mean you that's what it is. You got a guy who's who has made a following behind the saying that facts don't care about your feelings, appealing to feelings when it benefits him. And that just goes to show you they're all insincere, and all these people have no morals and no principles that they stand on, and they will be willing to sacrifice any and everything if it meant that they could have their way, right? All these different conservative commentators. That's what that shows you. If they could have their way, they'd be willing to sacrifice any principle they profess to believe in. And so, you know, we as individuals have to make sure that we're fighting for our own interests, that we are trying to protect the little rights that we have, you know, because you see all around the world, I mean, countries where they don't have free speech, where they don't have a constitutional protection to such an idea, they're suffering. You know, they're being thrown in jail. They're being persecuted by their governments. It's really a wild situation. You know, it's a very wild situation.
Yeah, most definitely. Anything else to add?
No, I don't really have anything else. I think we covered everything. I mean, you know, everything about this topic that I could think of. You know, it's what I always try to do, and even when I talked earlier about the voting situation, what I always try to do is encourage people. I try to encourage people to empower them to make their own decisions for their lives, right? Um, you should be informed enough to do what's best for you. You should be well versed enough to be in control of your own life and destiny, and think for yourself and do, you know. And this is, I mean, the spirit of the show is having uncomfy conversations. You know, we want to speak truth, even if it's uncomfortable, because that is how we all improve. That's how we all grow as a society, as a group of people. You know, when we can have those kind of conversations, the uncomfortable ones, right? Because, like, that's the whole idea of free speech. You know, free speech means the freedom to say something that people in power don't like. Freedom of speech doesn't mean the freedom to say the things that everybody else likes. It's the power to say the things that people dislike, the people in power dislike. That's freedom of speech. And so I think, you know, our show stands on that ground of truth tellers, of truth seekers throughout history, you know. And so, I mean, in that vein, you see Nikki Haley. I think it was on like a panel. She was giving an interview, and she was talking about how it's a national security issue, and everyone should be able to, if you want to be on the internet, you should have to use your real name, and they should have to, you know, verify. And it's like, you know, who supports this woman, man?
She's Hillary Clinton
her?
in red face.
Right. That's it. She's a Republican, and that's not even, you know, because to call her a conservative Hillary Clinton would be like an it would be redundant, because Hillary Clinton is a conservative, but she's a Republican Hillary Clinton,
right?
Who happens to be an Indian lady. That's it. You know, that's it. And we don't need people like that here. We don't need people like that. And I'm not going to generalize, right? I'm not going to generalize, because that's not the show we have. We always try to be, you know, nuanced and understand the context. But I find it interesting, like when you saw the mask stuff and the vaccine and the virus stuff earlier, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, that one doctor who's Chinese or Taiwanese on CNN was really extreme and draconian. And what you find, what I've noticed, is there are a lot of Asian people who come to America who are fine to whatever degree. And obviously it's not every one of them, because as far as I can tell, Vivek Ramaswamy has not been pushing these kinds of talking points. But you find a lot of them are okay with authoritarian control. And I don't know if it's because culturally they're countries, their societies are built on a more codependence or interdependence than America, where we kind of have this, we do what we want to do and what benefits us, and we have our own individual freedoms. But people from that part of the world really seem to enjoy a structure that mandates extremes and controls over individual rights and individual freedoms and individual desires, and extreme heavy-handedness in the face of any type of resistance. And I think it might just be cultural, but I don't like it. So
well said. And once again, thank you guys, those tuning in and those who will be tuning in the future to Uncomfy Truths podcast, episode 14 in the bag. We will be coming back to you twice a month, so about 2 weeks out from now. And I kind of like how we're not like a daily show. We're not like every few hours type of show. You got to kind of let the headlines and let it kind of simmer and sit. It kind of see where things are going. It's easy to kind of live in sort of a gut reaction where something's coming out. Oh, I got to make a video about this development. We work a little more laid back here. We got to like step back, look at things from a big picture, let the dust settle after a few days or weeks. I think twice a month is a good pace for us. These episodes will continue, like I said, because we got to promote it. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe. Uncomfy Truths. We're on Rumble and YouTube. Once again, if you're tuning into a YouTube live stream, super chat us. We appreciate any contribution, and we will have some other form of payment contribution that you can contribute to. But other than that, that's all. That's it. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. We're going to skip the Thanksgiving holiday, obviously. We'll see you as we head into December. All right, Conspiracy Brother. I'll see you next time, my friend. And,
okay.
Yep. Y'all have a good one.
All right. Peace.
Peace.